All right, so we're breaking down the XFL draft team by team. We're starting with the Eastern Conference, and let's go ahead and start off with the team that had the number 1 overall pick in the skills phase, the DC Defenders. Pastel, it's like a JMU alumni team.
Hey, man, Rashard Davis, wide receiver, first overall, JMU. Honestly, the Defenders were pretty much drafting all JMU players. You had Rashard Davis, you had Khalid Abdullah, the running back from JMU. You had Terrence Lee Alls, the wide receiver from JMU. All great players that me and Glessner actually saw in the championships a few years back that played for JMU. Hey, they're great players at the end of the day. Like, I don't have a problem with the DC Defenders picking them. It's just awesome that my favorite team picked my college players.
So, tell us a little bit about Davis taking up number 1 overall and what he brings to the Defenders, because
I don't think anyone saw that coming.
I don't think anybody saw that coming. Give us the 4-1-1.
So first of all, I think if you look at the first round, there's probably some players in the first round in general that you're like, wait, who's that guy? Like, why did you pick that round? And I think it's very strategic on the coaches in the XFL. So Rashard Davis was a phenomenal kick returner and punt returner, which makes me think that maybe the rule book will tailor more to special teams than the NFL.
I like it.
As far as the receiver skill set, he's good. He is good. Don't get me wrong. Is he the best receiver in this draft? I didn't think so.
Really small guy. He's only like 5'9", 5'10".
He's small, and he's not – I mean, he's fast, but he's not 4.2 speed. He's not 4.3. He's probably more 4.4 speed. He is a good receiver, and he's a phenomenal punt returner and kick returner. I say all that saying I love him. I love JMU football players. Do I think he should have gone number 1? Probably not, unless the rule book is tailored to special teams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Who are some other players that they drafted that you like?
Yeah, man. So there's some players that I like and that I don't like. So overall, I thought the Defenders had a great draft. On a great standpoint, I would give them a B+.
That seems to be the consensus with most media outlets, is that the Defenders did very well in the draft.
Well, it was just top to bottom, man. They were picking players in phase 5 in like the 8th round that I'm like, all right, this guy's pretty good. So there's players like Raheem Moore, the 2nd round pick for the Denver Broncos. Which, oh man, you remember that one highlight where he had the Hail Mary from Joe?
I think
Flacco?
Everybody remembers it, Pastel. You don't need to stomp on the guy while he's down.
Well,
this is a league of redemption.
I think he's a phenomenal athlete. I think he's going to redeem himself in the XFL. But man, that was a tough play. Koa Farmer played for the Raiders. Penn State linebacker. Matt Elam, Tyree Jackson. I think that quarterback has a potential in the NFL. Tracy Sprinkle, defensive tackle for Ohio State. He played for the Browns for a little bit.
Yep.
Chris Brown, offensive guard for USC, a 4-year starter, 6'5", 310. They have some really good players all in all in this draft. Now, there's a few players that I question, and that is Tyree Kennel. He's a safety from Michigan. He got picked up by the Bengals this past year. And then you have Sam Montgomery. And I know Sam Montgomery, a lot of people, they do know who that is. That's a 3rd-round pick out of LSU.
He was a great college player.
Great college player. He played for the Houston Texans, Oakland Raiders, Cincinnati Bengals, but he got released every time he got on a team. And so my question is, why was he getting released? Okay, maybe it was off the field issues, but another team's willing to take a flyer on you, and then you get released shortly after that, which makes you think, hey, there's some red flags for this guy, which I just don't know if he's going to work out in the XFL. I think he might be a lost cause at this point.
You mentioned a bunch of guys, but you didn't mention the 2 that stood out to me. The running backs that the DC Defenders selected, silly. They got Jarrell Presley, who was the leading rusher in the AAF. And then they go and get Donnell Pumphrey, Kenny's boy, who's the all-time leading rusher in NCAA history. If Donnell can get back to his college days and get healthy, that's a hell of a 1-2 punch in the backfield for Pep Hamilton.
Yeah, and it fits what Pep Hamilton's probably going to try and do on offense, which is establish the run. And so what a better way to do that than have arguably the 2 best running backs in the league potentially. Obviously, Jarrell Presley, I read some advanced stats on him where it talked about he was like one of the best college football players of all time at yards after contact, like breaking runs after he's been hit initially. And then, of course, Donnell Pumphrey, I mean, you don't have to say much other than the fact that he is the all-time leading rusher in NCAA football history. Like, that doesn't happen by accident. You have to be really, really, really good. Now, granted, that might be short-lived because Jonathan Taylor might break it, but still, you think how many great rushers have come through the NCAA, and he's number one right now. So
Yeah.
I mean, that writes itself.
Pastel, the other guy I really liked that they picked up was Scooby Wright, All-American linebacker out of Arizona. I think any XFL team would have loved to have him just man in the middle for them and just running sideline to sideline. I thought it was a fantastic pick, and I think he's just going to kind of be the staple of that defense.
You were high on their defense overall, weren't you, Glass?
I was. I actually thought they had the best draft out of anybody. What they did up front, their linebackers. And,
I love their linebackers.
I love their linebacking core, and I do like the Sam Montgomery pick, but I have the same concern Pastel has.
They went for speed over size, which is the complete opposite of what Kenny's team, which he'll talk about in a minute. But they got guys, Rashard Davis, smaller guy, speedster. Then a few rounds later, they go DeAndre Tompkins out of Penn State, who was kind of like a Rashard Davis makeup. He was a punt return specialist, kickoff. He was really good in special teams. So they went with speed over size. So like Pastel said, I'm thinking that they really wanted to tailor their rules or tailor their personnel to the rules. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, because Kenny's team went the exact opposite way. They went with the big boys up in New York with the Guardians and Kevin Gilbride.
Yeah, I loved their draft, to be honest, man. I loved that they went with 3 receivers to start out with, which was kind of the opposite of where I thought they might go, since we know Gilbride runs a pro-style offense.
Yeah.
But, you know, he got Mikhail McKay and Ayers, who were former AAF teammates who lit up the league. And so he's hoping to replicate that success, which I love, because he's got his big body guy, and Ayers is a typical slot guy. So they're going to complement each other very well. And then I thought what was interesting is Brandon talked about the potential rules and if it was going to be tailored towards special teams. Well, they got Quadre Henderson, who is a return specialist and was one of the best receivers at the University of Pittsburgh. And we know the lineage of receivers that have come from there. He was a consensus All-American at the return position in the NCAA. Offensive line-wise, they got the Quanjo brothers, who are local to us, but both of those guys were studs at Alabama. They were big-time recruits. Yep. They didn't quite work out in the NFL, but those guys have serious upside and serious talent, and they're still relatively young. They're 24, 25, 26 years old, I think the oldest is. So I liked what they did there from an offensive line perspective. They got 2 running backs from Wake Forest, Matt Colburn and Tommy Bohannon. So being a guy who's a Wake Forest fan, I was really excited to see that. Defensively, I even like a lot of their picks too. Jamar Summers was a beast at UConn, was one of the best cornerbacks in the AAF. So he's a guy who's got experience at corner and safety. Demetrius Cox, a safety from Michigan State, another stud. And I really like this Victor Achi kid they drafted, who was an undrafted player out of Stony Brook. Had a cup of coffee with the Ravens, the Jets, the Chiefs, and the Titans. Never really stuck around, but was a sack machine at Stony Brook. He's a little undersized. He's 6'1", 240, so he's small for that defensive end position. But he's going to be a guy who primarily is going to line up outside and just rush the quarterback, get after him. So I really like the overall scope and the versatility that they drafted in general as a whole. I like their roster makeup. I feel it's a good mix of big guys who can really protect the quarterback, guys who can stuff on the line. And then you also got some burners in there who can really make a difference from a special teams perspective and a return specialist. And they talk about Rashard Davis. Honestly, Quadre Henderson might be the best return guy in the entire XFL. Again, to reiterate, he was a consensus first-team All-American at that position.
Yeah, I'm excited for the Quanjo brothers. I mean, that's what when I saw them get drafted together, I was like, man, I hope that they can kind of live up to all the hype. I mean, both were 5-star recruits out of high school. One went to Alabama. The other one, I'm sorry, they both went to Alabama.
They both went to Alabama.
That's right. One committed to Auburn, and then signing day changed over to Alabama. But they were so highly regarded, and they were good college players too. So it's hard for me to not think that they won't be dominant in the XFL.
I'm big on the Jamar Summers pick. Being an AAF guy, I watched a lot of Jamar Summers, and I'd say him and Keith Reeser were probably the two best cornerbacks. So Kevin Gilbride going 3 cornerbacks in a row, and with Jamar Summers, he's got his shutdown guy, so I think he set himself up well there. And then kind of like what we talked about, it was an interesting strategy going with 3 wide receivers to begin. And Kevin Gilbride, we really thought he'd go running back early, but he did get the big body receivers that can go up and grab the ball. Kind of like, you think back to the Giant days, like Plexico Burress, Hakeem Nicks, those guys are not going to blow by you, but they're like body control, big type of receivers that can go up and get the ball.
Yeah, one of the guys I didn't even touch on was Yancey, D'Angelo Yancey out of Purdue. Again, 2 big body guys. You're going to have him and McKay, who are going to be play the X and Y position and just absolutely create matchup nightmares, one-on-one situations. But then you got to sit there and worry about DeMarcus Ayers, just tearing up the inside, because that's what he is. He's a slot specialist. He's a guy who's going to get those over the middle yards, and now he's going to have 2 guys on the outside who are going to take the pressure off of him. I think Kevin Gilbride's licking his chops on what he's going to be able to do vertically there.
Yeah, he set up his quarterback well with some weapons to throw to up in New York. Let's move to St. Louis BattleHawks. Gless, you've been high on Christine Michael this whole time, and the BattleHawks ended up getting him a little bit later in the first round. So what are you seeing Christine Michael's outlook in St. Louis?
I think it's great. As an overall grade, I gave it an A-. They drafted a ton of guys from the Orlando Apollos of the AAF, which, for those who followed the AAF, they were they were the best team in the league, right? Loved what they did. Dynamic running backs with tons of talent. You see one right there, Christine Michael. Was a stud at Texas A&M University. Had a cup of coffee in the NFL. He was the starting running back for the Seahawks in 2016. Averaged over 4 yards a carry. A physical back that can kind of really get in between the tackles, but really has surprising breakaway speed. But the other running back that they got that being a Redskins fan, Matt Jones. Matt Jones was a 3rd-round pick out of Florida. Had some fumbling issues with the Skins, so they picked him, but that really 1-2 punch that I really liked when I saw Matt Jones come on there. I think these are a really good compliment. A couple other guys on the offensive side I just want to touch on. Guy I'm really high on, DeMornay Pearson-L out of Nebraska. So you guys talk about a Rashard Davis, who was a punt returner. DeMornay was actually first-team All-American as a freshman for a punt returner at Nebraska. Right. And you'll see some highlights here. I actually coached against DeMornay in high school. He played at West Potomac High School. And
did he do this to you?
Basically, yeah. He was running up and down the field. The guy's electric, and he got picked, I believe, 3rd in that first. He was their 3rd pick in the first phase. So just like Pastel said, when you talk about, hey, something's up with the rule book because they're picking these punt return and kick return guys pretty early. I think he was like the 3rd or 4th that I clearly noticed. I think he's going to be a big game breaker for the BattleHawks. So I really love that pick. Tight end, they got a guy named Marcus Lucas, a 6'5", 250 out of Missouri. Possible hybrid guy. He was actually a receiver in college, but they've moved him in the NFL. He's playing some tight end. And then on the offensive line, got some guys up there. A lot of guys to be honest with you, I just really didn't know. But one guy really stuck out to me was Kent Perkins. Started 34 games at University of Texas. Was starting tackle for them. So I think they're going to be all right on the offensive side of the ball. The defensive side of the ball is what I really like that they did. Their defense is really long. They got tons of pass rushers. And if you look at the front 7 part of their draft, they drafted 2 linebackers. That's it, right? Everything else were like defensive ends and defensive tackles. So I wonder if that means that they're going to be running a lot of 3-4, a lot of 3-man fronts with a lot of dime packages and nickel packages where they just won't have a lot of linebackers. So I thought that's what really stuck out to me. And all the guys that they got were like long, 6'5", 6'6", a couple guys off the top of my head. Terrence Garvin, was a rush end at West Virginia, also played for the Apollos. Andrew Ankara was an All-American at JMU. 6'5".
Naming off those Apollos, man.
Dude,
I know. Yeah, well, that's what I mean, man. They basically drafted the Orlando Apollos of the AAF. And then you get in the secondary, and Will Hill's obviously the big name, right? And that's a guy that we all really liked. Big-time ball hawk. A lot of people comparing to Mark Barron in the NFL. And you can see right here, guys just always around the ball. So I really like what they did, especially on defense. I think defense, they got some studs that they're going to be able to play with.
They got some playmakers, and then they got Kenny Robinson, the safety out of West Virginia, who everybody was following, being the first guy to come from the college ranks and making the jump to the XFL. So that was pretty cool as well to pair him up with Will Hill. Look at this hit right here. Oh, my God.
Boom.
On the Jags.
Yeah, it's going to be dynamic.
I had to make sure I played the highlights through to this one.
But here's the thing. With all the wide open offenses we're going to see in the XFL, I mean, you have to have two dudes back there that can play. I mean, those guys can play.
I think St. Louis has possibly the best secondary in all the XFL. Like we talked, like obviously you just talked about Will Hill, talked about Kenny Robinson, but the guy nobody mentions is Charles James. That guy's a baller, man. Like I don't remember if you guys remember him being on Hard Knocks and being on the Texans for a couple of years, but he's really, really good.
It's interesting that they drafted out of their first 5 picks in the defensive back phase, 4 were safeties.
Yep.
So it's interesting. They really weren't balanced in terms of their picking. Like they went heavy, like Gless said, only a couple of linebackers. They went heavy on the line, and then they went heavy at safety. So it kind of like gives you an insight of to what they're planning to do on the defensive side in St. Louis. Just really interesting.
Yeah.
Hey, Gless, I just had a question for you, man. What do you think about Brogan Roback going number 2?
Oh,
their
I
second
know.
overall draft pick.
I saw that, and when it instantly came out, I don't know, man. I mean, yeah, he was a guy in Hard Knocks for the Cleveland Browns. I don't know. I mean, he was a quarterback at Eastern Michigan. He may be a nice quarterback. I'm not quite sure why he's picked there. I don't know much about him other than he was on Hard Knocks, to be quite honest with you. And when I saw his name, I kind of scratched my head just because I don't know much about him.
Well, I just thought it was interesting that he went their second pick overall was a quarterback. Where I can understand a Connor Cook, who we all know is good.
Well,
I don't know about this guy.
But it's kind of what we've all been saying. We knew that the running back position and the receiver position was going to be stacked, right? There's tons of talent. You can find a lot of really good guys, find a lot of punt returners, apparently. I mean, we got All-Americans all over the place.
Yeah.
But I get there's just not enough quarterbacks, so I guess you got to take what you can get.
I guess
it's so cool that these undersized, quick guys maybe don't fit in the NFL game anymore, especially since they've gotten so far away from the kickoffs. But the XFL is trying to bring the kickoffs back. I mean, it's not official yet, but they're talking about moving the kicking team up so they can have more kickoffs. So they're limiting the impact. So it's not just a bunch of touchbacks. They're doing the 5-yard halo rule like they do in the CFL. So I mean, we're as we go through it, guys, we're seeing a pattern of these quick guys that not only can contribute on your offense, but in the special teams game as well. I think that that's something that shouldn't definitely not be overlooked. I mean, there's a guy with the Tampa Bay Vipers that kind of fits that mold that I want to talk about. But I need to start, if we talk about the Vipers, we got to talk about their number 1 pick, Nick Truesdale. Kenny, I know you listed him as your X factor, so I'm interested to see what you think about him. To me, it's kind of a head scratcher. He's the first tight end off the board. It just seemed very early. I don't think the next tight end off the board came until round 4. So I'm not sure why they, pushed their chips in for their first round pick on a guy that we talk about, a guy that's been there and done that. This guy has not been there, and he has not done that. He left Cincinnati because he got kicked off the team, transferred to Grand Rapids Community College, tore his ACL the first game of the year, decided, all right, that's enough. I'm signing pro. And then he was with the indoor league for a while, didn't really do much. Then he went to the AFL. He had almost 1,000 yards and 23 touchdowns in 2015. So that was like his one stellar year. And then it fell off again. He was with the AAF with Salt Lake, and he had decent success. He was a big target. He's a pretty quick guy. I mean, he's an athletic tight end, a pass catching tight end. But like, I just don't know why you spend your first round pick on him. It's just kind of interesting that Tampa Bay and Trustman is because Aaron Murray, with the lack of arm strength, they wanted to get him a security blanket. Yeah, that was a little subtle shot.
Okay.
I think Riley, I think to me, there's just not a lot of 6'5", 250-pound guys, especially much less in the NFL, but especially in the XFL draft, that are out there running 4.5 40s. Like The guy is a complete mismatch athletically. The question is can he put it together? I mean, we've seen spurts of it, I guess, in lower competition, and obviously he didn't really have a lot of opportunity in college with injuries and personal issues. So, I mean, the reason he's an X factor for me is because if he pans out, he might be one of the best players in the league athletically. Like he might be from size and speed and athleticism, he might be the number one guy. And if he doesn't work out, then you wasted your first round pick. So that's why it's such an X factor for me is he's either going to be ridiculously amazing and be such a mismatch, or he's going to be just, another run of the mill guy. And he's a guy, unfortunately, you picked middle of the first round.
Yeah. It's just,
I think it should.
Go ahead, Gless.
You know what I think, Riley? It shows that the skill is there, and Mark Trestman wanted the best player at his position. Right, and maybe that there was a receiver.
Like I said, the next tight end went off the board 3 rounds later.
Well, then apparently Mark Trestman holds him in high regard.
But there's no
something we don't know. So
there's no tight ends with the size and speed right now in the XFL that this guy has. I know there's guys who are decent like Orson Charles and a couple other guys, but none of those guys athletically. This guy's athletic background reads of a guy you'd see selected today in the second or third round of the NFL.
No, I mean if he's your guy, he's your guy. I just think you could have got him on the way back because, like I said, it's a lot to put into a guy that. I mean, some teams didn't even draft a tight end. There's not even a tight end on their roster, so it's just an interesting strategy. We'll see how it plays out. But I just, if I'm a Tampa Bay fan, I would have liked to have seen someone that's a little more established, that has a little more production in their background. But I mean, yeah, the physical tools are obviously there. They also went with 3 AAF guys, kind of seeing a trend here. Tampa Bay scouted the AAF hard, by the way. There's AAF guys all over this roster. Rennell Hall, he played for the Apollos. Reese Horn, Alonzo Moore. Moore was in that Commanders wide receiver group with the New York guys. Reese Horn is the guy that stood out to me. I was hoping that he was going to go to Seattle with Brandon Silvers because they developed some stellar chemistry. Reese Horn really picked up his game when Silvers got in. He had 100 yards in his last 2 games before the league shut down. So it would have been nice to see him there. Maybe he'll capture that same chemistry with Aaron Murray. We'll see. But the guy I really want to talk about is hot take coming. Prepare yourself. I think he is the best pick in Tampa Bay's draft, and I think he might be one of the steals of the draft overall, and that is Quentin Flowers. What a perfect fit. He played at South Florida. I mean, good God, I can't even go through all of the records that he has because there's 42 of them. He has 42 records between USF and the American Athletic Conference. He was a quarterback in college, but he rushed for over 1,500 yards and 18 touchdowns. In 2016, in one freaking year. I mean, this guy is a football player. And in the XFL, with all those rules changes that we're talking about, you need football players. I mean, guys, I'm just picturing him, with his throwing ability, with those being able to throw multiple passes behind the line of scrimmage, the things that Trestman could do with this guy, off the charts. You need to get this guy involved early and often because he is a freaking playmaker.
Yeah, no, he was actually a running back for the Cincinnati Bengals, and when they first converted him to running back, I was like, I don't know, too many experiments from a quarterback to a running back don't actually work out. But he actually did. He performed well during preseason, and I honestly thought he deserved a spot on our active roster. He did get promoted at one point to the active roster, but most of his time was on the practice squad. He spent a little bit of time on the Indianapolis Colts as well, and then he obviously got drafted by Tampa Bay. But he's a good player, and I think when they can utilize his skill set behind the line of scrimmage and have those double passes, it's just another skill set in the bag for him that I think it's going to work out well.
Yeah, he's the kind of guy that you got to get involved in as many ways as you can. I think he's the steal of the draft for the Tampa Bay Vipers.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah.
Big prediction.
Look at that. That's a big prediction.
On the defensive line, so it's interesting. They went undersized guys, but they went athletic guys. Ricky Walker out of Virginia Tech. He was a second-round ACC talent, 49 tackles, 2 forced fumbles, 2 sacks. They team him up with Josh Banks from Wake Forest, who was an up-and-down player but was an athletic freak. Kenny, he had 9.5 sacks, 94 tackles at Wake Forest, and then they team him up with another defensive lineman from Wake Forest. They must love their ACC guys, and Nikita Whitlock. So out of those 3 guys, all kind of have the same thing going on. They're undersized, but they're athletic, and they have high motors, and were big-time playmakers for their teams.
Yeah, and touching on Nikita Whitlock, he might be the strongest player in the draft. He had 43 reps at 225 pounds at his pro day. Super quick, super athletic. Was asked to play fullback in the NFL.
Look at this man. That is a man right there.
Calm down,
me right now.
Save some
He was
girls
asked
for the rest of us.
I know, right? He was asked to play fullback in the NFL, so he's quick, he's got great feet. But like you said, Riley, the problem is he's 5'11", 250 pounds, so severely
that's small for a DN.
Yeah, very undersized, but the guy wreaks havoc. And like I said, I would not surprise me if he's the strongest player, bar none, in the XFL.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about their secondary, but they get Reggie Northup in the middle. For their middle linebacker, another Apollo guy. He was the leader of their. These Apollos, they're showing up everywhere in the AAF. But he was actually the leader of their defense. He led the team in tackles with 35 tackles. He had a couple of sacks, a couple of turnovers. So bringing him in to anchor the Tampa Bay defense is definitely a smart move. He's out of Florida State, so he's right near home. So I think overall they got a pretty good defensive team. Went more towards athletes than size. So we'll see how that plays out. What's up, football fans? This is Riley from XFL Chalk Talk. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date on all things XFL and interact with us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at XFL Chalk Talk.